Well, thank you very much for the acknowledgement, and it's always such a great pleasure to me to be able to have the opportunity to speak before such a beautiful group as I see here. Today we're going to talk about several things. Narcotic addiction, as you know, is what we're going to talk about. And running through your beautiful minds, you may be wondering, well, why a lecture on narcotic addiction? As you know, today, narcotic addiction and the use of narcotics is really infiltrated the schools quite a bit. There's many reasons for this. One of the primary reasons is because it's been really advertised. It's a funny thing. I know here not too long ago, there was one professor by the name of Willie, and he discovered a little something, called it LSD, or at least he contributed to it. And then he had a few followers. And today they would just be in their own isolated pit. But then, of course, we have magazines such as Look, Life, Post, and they really capitalized and monopolized the thing. I'm sure that you've seen many 15, 18, 13-page spreads, full color, on many of this, which involves LSD. And because of this, overnight, just like that, it was known throughout the world. And of course, kids, students all over the world are trying to set up their own independency. They want to become independent, set their own ways, and things like this. And then this was all of a sudden something that, wow, well, what is it? And it became part of today's generation, you see. But if it were to continue, it would be a down generation eventually, because the quickest way to hurt a person or a nation or a group, the quickest way to hurt a person's goals, his aims, his ability, his life, is by introducing that person to narcotics, whether it's in the form of a needle or whether it's in the form of just dropping pills, popping pills, smoking pot, using LSD. Now, when I say these things, you may question it, and were I a lawyer or a doctor or someone else up here telling you about narcotic addiction, you might very easily say, well, what does he know about it? Has he ever taken a trip? You could very easily put this question to me. And I just wanted to say that I have taken so many trips for 19 years that I could buy out the Greyhound bus station. So when I say these things to you, I didn't get them secondhand, or I didn't read about them, I didn't watch or hear about them on TV, or I didn't read about them out of a medical journal or anything like that. I experienced these various things, you see. So I want to bring one other thing out, and that is that I'm not here to give you a sermon. I'm not here to preach or talk goody-goody talk to you. I'm not here to talk to you about evil and sin or anything like that. I'm just here to attempt to give you some account of what I have seen in the 19 years that I was a drug addict, and then let you take it for whatever it's worth. And if in some kind of a way I can give you a reality on narcotic addiction, well, then I will feel that the lecture has been worth it. Okay? So I'm going to talk about narcotic addiction. I've briefly started into it. And then I'm also going to talk about Narconon. I want to mention that Narconon is the name of some therapy groups that I set up for narcotic addicts at Arizona State Prison. There are two of these therapy groups up there. One of them is inside of the walls, and the other one is just outside of the walls, which is set up there for the younger offender, or men under 25. These groups, Narconon, are the only ones throughout the world. When I say that, I mean we are the only therapy groups that use the particular science that we use. Our purpose in Narconon, there are many of us that lecture from time to time, our purpose is to be able to set these programs up throughout the United States and all of the various penitentiaries. And many people are really inquiring about Narconon because many people are finding out of our statistic. I'd like to mention that up to now, in the last 18 months, we have had 12 graduates, or 12 men who have left these Narconon groups from Arizona State Prison. And out of the 12 men, none have returned. back to prison. These men are really doing well. We have 6 here in Phoenix, and we have some men in Tucson, and we have some men in Los Angeles. And these men are really, really doing great. It's fantastic. Many of you may be aware that 12 men out of 12 is unheard of. Your federal narcotic hospitals, with their staffs of psychiatrists, psychologists, are having a very difficult time in getting any cures with narcotic addicts. Theirs is somewhere under 10%. It varies, it fluctuates. And so when all of a sudden a group comes along and starts to be able to put out the statistics that we are, well, people want to know about it. They say, well, what is it that you're using? Man, what do you have? What kind of potential? Well, we in Narconon have a certain something that before a person can pull out of narcotics, before a person can pull out of anything, if a person was having difficulty in school, if a person was having difficulty at home, if a person was having difficulties anywhere, the only way that he could get out of the pits would be to become more able. In other words, he would have to have a greater ability. I started using narcotics when I was 13 years old. I started smoking pot. And I figured, well, I'm just going to smoke pot once in a while. It'll be a weekend thing. I'll just smoke it at parties. And I did this for quite some time. That was the only time that I used it. And this went on for 2 years. But then all of a sudden I got tired of driving on a Model T, and I wanted to get into a Cadillac, a Cadillac. I wanted something with some horsepower. So that's when I got the needle. But I had always said I will never go on the needle. But it happened just so casually. The next thing I knew, I was tying my arm and trying it out with some friends of mine. So anyway, I went on to heroin when I was 15 years. And when I started on pot, it's fantastic. I was going to, on my way to play baseball, and there were some other friends of mine. This was in Tucson. And on my way to play baseball, we were passing in front of a porch. There were some friends up there, and then they called down. One of them called down and said, hey, man, how'd you like to fly like a bird? And he went through the whole thing like that, and we looked at him. We didn't quite know what was happening. We thought he was a little goofy. And we knew him. He was one of the friends around the block there. And then he said, how would you like to blow some pot? You know, how'd you like to smoke some weed? Well, the other kids got scared and they ran off. And I started to also, but then he said, oh, Willie ain't chicken, Willie's hip. So I didn't want to be chicken, and of course I wanted to be hip. So I walked up there and put that first reefer in my mouth. This guy, I looked up to him. You know, the guy dressed well and had his shoes shined all the time, his hair combed real nice, and he had girls, and he had a little money in his pocket, and he could smooth talk, and all these things. And I said, man, that cat is hip. And I wanted to somewhat be like him, you know. So I started smoking pot, and I looked at the way he walked, because this cat was hip. And like he told me, he says, man, you got to be hip. You know, to get high, you got to know what's happening. It's where it's at, Jack. So I wanted to be hip, so I started to walk like him, and this is about the way he walked. And I did too for years. So I walked like that too. All those years that I was hip, I used to walk like that. I think maybe I still got a little bit of a characteristic of doing that. I still got part of that machinery in there. But anyway, that was part of being hip, you see. And so part of being hip is going to the penitentiary and the whole schmear. If anything I say today you may not agree with, and you don't have to believe anything I say, but this one thing I can say for real, I can say with much certainty, and that is that a person that gets high is anything but hip. There may be some of you that may resent that, and here's what I mean by that. Let me back that statement up and see if it makes sense to you. To begin with, life is nothing but a game. When I say game, I merely means that a game has certain anatomies. It has an anatomy. For example, a person goes out to play basketball. There are certain things that he can do in the game. There are people playing in the game just like there are people in life. In the game, there are certain things that we can do, and if we do them well, we get rewarded. There are certain things that we can't do, and if we do them, we are penalized for it in a game of basketball. So we can win the game, or we can go out of it just by goofing. In life, it's the same way. We're players. Certain things that we do, and if we do them properly, we do nothing but prosper. If we do some of the other things which aren't groovy as far as this physical universe is concerned, well, then we get penalized. And the people that impose these penalties are police officers and just this physical universe in general. So if you saw somebody go into a basketball game and you saw that instead of dribbling the ball, he ran with it, instead of putting it in that basket, he put it in this one, and instead of passing it to the guys who were wearing red like he was, he passed it to the guys who were wearing green, you'd look at him and you couldn't say he was hip. You think he was a little crazy. Well, it's the same thing in life. You would say, well, he's playing the game against himself and his friends, his team. But when a person does something in life that's going to backfire on him, when he plays a game that is going to backfire on him, he can't be too hip, can he? I'll describe how Narconon works. And for example, the person learns about what communication is. It's formulas. Sometimes when you see somebody who has had a misunderstanding, and they start to quarrel or something, somewhere along the line, something has happened. In other words, the formula has been violated. You see, it's a very, very precise formula. And if any of you really knew this formula well, you probably never have any misunderstandings with anybody. It's that fantastic. So we learn there first the formulas of communication, and then we learn what responsibility is. Actual anatomies of it. We learn the anatomies of control. In other words, what it means to control something, to be fully in control. We learn what it is to create. In other words, we create all the time because we're constantly thinking, so we're creating. Some people can create high-toned creations, and when they do, like everything that they touch turns to gold. Other people are not quite that able. Again, I'm using the word ability, are not quite that able, but they still create, but they create low-tone creations. For example, they lie, or when they see something, or when they see someone trying to promote something or to do something, they'll chop it or knock it. You see, this is a low-tone creation for that person. The person is not able. So learn about what creations are and how to do these things. We learn what it is to be at cause and how to cause. We learn what it is about affinity. We learn what a cycle of action is, how it starts and how it ends. And we learn many, many things. Along with that, we are constantly doing drills. And these drills go something like this. Have you ever talked to somebody and when you're talking to them, as soon as you start to talk, they'll look at the wall, or they'll look at the ceiling, or they'll shift, or they'll fiddle with their fingers or something? Their confront is out. And incidentally, man, your confront is real good. You've got a real good confront. I have to commend you on it. If you ever sat down with somebody for 2 hours and intentionally you wanted to confront with somebody, you probably couldn't find but 1 out of 200 people that could confront with you for 2 hours without having to feel that they had to do this, or that they had to sit this way, or pull their pipe out, or go into a psychiatrist pose, or one of these things, or whatever it might be. The person would feel that they had to be interesting to you. So in these drills, a person learns how to confront, not with his body, but with his beingness, because that's all we are. We're a being inside of a body. And so there are many, many other drills that we do, and they are beautiful. So all of this constantly is bringing the ability of the person out. You see, in Narconon, we don't talk about narcotic addiction. Oh, a person might talk about it if he wants. But if we were to talk about narcotic addiction, let's say a narcotic addict gets up before 20 or 50 other narcotic addicts, well, we know what he's going to say. So we could just stay there all day and talk about narcotic addiction. A person will say, well, what I want is some ability. How can I learn to look? How can I know who I am, what life is about? If there's a problem, how can I locate it without having to go to a counselor? How can I solve all my problems? All right, that is the way that Narconon works. Okay, I'm going to open it up for questions and answers. Yes. How did I kick the habit? Well, again, it was through the groups of Narconon. after 19 years of trying and trying and trying, and I've tried just about everything. I was at narcotic hospitals. I was probed and picked at and pushed and buttons pushed and disseminated and dissected by all kinds of people, psychiatrists, psychologists. Everybody was evaluating for me, telling me what my problems were. And everybody had a different viewpoint, and I didn't know who was right, and I was just, like that, you know. I even went into the ministry at one time, and I tried everything to get away from narcotics. But I couldn't find anything that would work for me, and I noticed that these other men at the prison had also gone through almost the same thing. They also had been in narcotic hospitals, had been treated by professional mental healers and the whole thing, and all of us seemed to be in the same boat. But we were still nowhere. We didn't know what the problem was, because everybody had told us different things, because we had become everybody else's viewpoint. And then all of a sudden, through the science that was so beautiful, the books that we read that never at any time did it talk about narcotic addiction, all it did was it just showed us about what life was about. In other words, we learned how to play the game of chess, you see. And then all of a sudden you say, well, let's see, you can move the pawn over here, and this is a good way to checkmate. Oh yeah, well, I can start winning this way, you see. And so by doing that, all of a sudden I no longer had to start to wonder, well, this and that, or will it or won't it, or gee, I don't know. All of a sudden I could start to look and I could start to handle. And the other men also found the same thing, that they started to become sane again, and they started to resolve their problems because all of a sudden they had the tools with which to start to look. And we no longer had somebody telling us what our problem was. It was really fantastic. And this is the best way to make a man sane. The person is the only one that can really, essentially, resolve the problem, because he is the one that created it in the first place. Another question, yes. Have I ever thought of going back to narcotics? No. Okay, thank you.